Heading up the news this morning, rock and roll singer Rick Nelson was killed last night in a private plane crash in Texas.
Claimed the life of one of America's first teen idols. Ricky Nelson died in DeKalb, Texas on his way to a New Year's Eve concert in Dallas.
Ricky Nelson's story is making headlines again. And this time, it's not about his music. Years after his death, new details about what he left behind have finally come to light.
Rock and roll singer Ricky Nelson dies in a New Year's Eve plane crash while on his way to perform at a holiday celebration.
In Cleveland tonight, a crash after a high-speed chase claims the lives of 2 innocent people.
And they've left many people in shock. For a long time, there were quiet rumors about the fortune he built, but no one knew the full truth until now. What's been uncovered is so surprising that it's now raising even more questions. How did he build such a massive estate? Why was it kept quiet for so long? And what does this mean for his legacy today? Join us as we uncover the truth about Ricky Nelson's hidden fortune and why it changes everything. Ricky Nelson, early life. If there's anything life has taught us, it's that the full story about what a man truly had does not always come out until long after he's gone. And that's exactly what happened to Ricky Nelson. For years, many believed they knew everything there was to know about the music idol, his fame, his fortune, his estate. But recent developments about what he really left behind have taken many by surprise, including his own family. It turns out there was far more beneath the surface than anyone imagined. So how did one of America's first teen idols quietly build such a fortune? Stay with us as we begin the story from the very beginning. Ricky Nelson was born in Eric Hilliard Nelson on May 8, 1940, in Teaneck, New Jersey. He was the younger son of bandleader Ozzie Nelson and singer Harriet Hilliard. From the beginning, entertainment ran in his blood. In 1952, the Nelson family launched what would become one of America's most iconic family sitcoms, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet.
In today's History's headlines, the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet in Bethlehem.
Before stepping up into their roles as part of one of America's favorite TV families, Mr. and Mrs. Nelson had a date with a couple of 100 Lehigh University students.
Ricky, just 12 years old at the time, joined the cast alongside his parents and older brother David. The show gave people a close look into the Nelsons' lives, combining real moments with scripted ones and making it hard to tell what was real and what was acted. But it was not just Ricky's acting that won people over. In 1957, Ricky decided to step into the music world with his debut single, which he titled I'm Walkin'. The song suddenly went viral, and that marked the official start of his career as a recording artist. So just like that, Ricky Nelson became one of the first teenage idols of the rock and roll era. You see, unlike his siblings, Ricky wasn't just following in their parents' footsteps or living off their fame. He was building something completely his own. With songs like Poor Little Fool, Hello Mary Lou, and Travelin' Man, Nelson made a name for himself in music. By the early 1960s, he had sold millions of records and often appeared on the Billboard charts. One special thing about Ricky Nelson's career was how he successfully went from being a TV star to a music star, something that was very rare at the time. He balanced both roles with ease, performing on the show, while also building a strong music career. His clean-cut appearance and quiet, polite way of speaking made him popular with teenagers and trusted by their parents. In many ways, he helped create the image of the American pop star, even before social media or music videos existed. At the height of his career, Ricky Nelson seemed to have it all: fame, talent, and a place in music history. But like many stars who rise fast and young, his success came with a cost. Behind the smooth voice and clean-cut image was a man quietly struggling to hold his world together. In 1963, Ricky married Kristen Harmon, an actress and the daughter of football legend Tom Harmon. The couple had 4 children together: Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam. To the outside world, They were the picture of a perfect Hollywood family. But inside the home, things were far more complicated. Stay with us, because this is where things take a different turn. As the 1960s gave way to the 1970s, Ricky's music career began to shift. The British invasion and changing musical tastes pushed his sound out of the spotlight. He tried to adapt to this change by moving toward country rock with his band, the Stone Canyon Band.
In my book, he was right there with Elvis.
In the golden age of rock and roll, Elvis was the king, but Little Ricky was Prince Charming.
He has a great voice, a really sweet voice.
Rick Nelson had a TV show, good looks, a great band, and a 7-year reign at the top of the charts.
So in 1972, he released a song called Garden Party. This song was inspired by the rejection he felt when trying to perform his old hits for a new audience. It showed that Ricky understood just how much the world and the music scene had changed. And just as he was struggling on stage, off stage, life was getting harder. By the early 1970s, Ricky's home was filled with smoke, alcohol, and growing tension. Kristen later admitted they would party hard, both heavily using drugs and alcohol. She eventually entered therapy, and so did Ricky, though he soon began missing his sessions. Their struggles became public in 1977, when Kristen filed for divorce, citing substance abuse and emotional neglect. Although they briefly reconciled, the damage had already been done. After years of conflict, the marriage officially ended in December 1982. The divorce cost Ricky more than $1 million in legal fees and support, adding even more strain to his already troubled personal life. Despite these struggles, Ricky kept performing. It was not just for the money. He still loved the music, but the venues were smaller now, the paychecks thinner, and the pressure heavier. People remembered the teenage idol, but few saw the man now dealing with the weight of a life that had grown far more complicated. And yet, he pushed on. Friends say he was hoping for a fresh start, personally and professionally. Ricky Nelson had a new partner, Helen Blair, who traveled with him and brought some peace into his life. But even as he tried to rebuild, time was running out. On December 31st, 1985, tragedy struck. Ricky Nelson was on his way to perform at a New Year's Eve concert in Dallas, Texas, when his plane crashed near DeKalb, Texas.
A plane crash in DeKalb, Texas on December the 31st, 1985 got the attention of the world. Singer Ricky Nelson was on that plane.
The plane, a Douglas DC-3, caught fire in the air, most likely because of a problem with the heater. Ricky, his fiancée Helen Blair, and 5 members of his band died in the crash. Only the pilot and co-pilot survived. The news shocked fans all over the country. Ricky was just 45 years old. Messages and tributes came pouring in from musicians, actors, and longtime fans who had followed him since he was young. Even though he hadn't been as famous in his later years, his sudden death reminded people of the strong bond they had with him over the decades. Hundreds came to his funeral, and Ricky was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. Now, when Ricky died, there was a lot of talk about what he actually left behind for his children. Some believed he left nothing. Others said he left his house, his music rights, but some believed he left behind something even more personal. So, what exactly did Ricky Nelson really leave behind? Let's find out. Ricky Nelson's assets. When Ricky Nelson died in 1985, most people thought he left this world with little to his name. After all, the divorce had drained much of his wealth, and his later career wasn't as financially rewarding as his early years. But quietly, behind the scenes, something surprising was unfolding. Over time, what Ricky left behind began to reveal itself, not through headlines, but through checks, contracts, and copyrights that refused to fade. You see, Ricky Nelson made one decision that turned out to be of more value than anyone could have imagined. He held on to key rights to his music, Unlike many artists of his time who sold off publishing rights early on, Ricky retained control of much of his catalog. This meant that every time his songs played on the radio, in a TV show, or were bought by fans, money was still being made. So, songs like Hello Mary Lou, Lonesome Town, Poor Little Fool, and especially Travelin' Man continued to bring in royalty checks long after Ricky was gone. These songs are not just old records gathering dust. They represent timeless tracks that kept finding their way into new formats: cassette tapes, CDs, digital downloads, and eventually, streaming platforms. Ricky's music outlived the era it was born in, and because he held on to those rights, his family saw the benefits. Unlike many pop stars of his time who faded into obscurity, Ricky Nelson's catalog never stopped working. It quietly generated revenue month after month, year after year. His children may not be living in luxury, but they are not left with nothing either. There is still hope and a slow financial recovery underway. But it didn't stop with music. There was another surprising source of income: the very show that launched him into stardom. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, one of America's longest-running sitcoms.
The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, starring the entire Nelson family, Ozzie, Harriet, David, and Ricky. Here is Ozzie, who plays the part of Ozzie Nelson.
Has now become a nostalgic treasure trove. Syndication rights, DVD collections, and digital licensing for classic TV channels brought in even more revenue. What many people forget is that Ozzie and Harriet wasn't just entertainment, it was early branding. It helped establish Ricky as a household name. And because he was part of the cast and the family that owned much of the show's production, he had a long-term stake in its success. Even decades later, as networks looked to rerun the show or license clips, those deals turned into steady income for the estate. So, although it did not make headlines like a blockbuster film or a #1 album, the checks kept coming. Slowly and quietly, Ricky's name was still earning. And here comes the shocking discovery that changed everything. Stay tuned. Now, it's well known that the money Ricky made from his music and television career was barely enough to support him after his divorce. By the time legal fees, child support, and lifestyle expenses were accounted for, not much was left. So imagine splitting what little remained between 4 children, then add in extended family members, creditors, and a load of unresolved legal issues. It was a financial mess, and that's exactly the situation the Nelson family found themselves in following his sudden death. But everything changed when Ricky's estate's legal team took a closer look at the documents and royalty statements. They noticed something was not just right. Even though Ricky's music was still popular, playing on the radio, featured in movies, and downloaded on new digital platforms, his reported earnings were shockingly low. That's when the family made a bold decision. They were not going to stay quiet. They were going to fight. The estate hired auditors and royalty experts to trace the financial trail. What they uncovered was shocking. There were major discrepancies in royalty payments, not just missed checks, but entire categories of earnings, especially from international markets and digital downloads, that had never been accounted for. The more they looked, the more it appeared that large music labels, some of the biggest in the industry, had quietly benefited from Ricky's legacy while paying back very little. The turning point came in 2018, when Ricky Nelson's estate joined a class action lawsuit against Sony Music. The suit, filed in federal court, accused the label of deliberately reducing royalty payouts for foreign streaming by charging so-called intercompany deductions, meaning that Sony was allegedly paying itself fees between branches in different countries, then passing those losses on to the artists. Ricky's family argued that this was not only unethical, but illegal, and that it had cost the estate hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, over the years. The legal battle lasted for 2 long years. At first, Sony denied any wrongdoing and tried to push back against the claims. But as more evidence came to light and pressure grew from other artists involved in the class action case, things started to change. It became harder for the company to defend its actions. In 2020, Sony finally agreed to a settlement worth $12.7 million to the Nelsons. Even more importantly, they also agreed to change how royalties would be calculated moving forward, making sure artists and their families received a fairer share from streaming and re-releases. For the Nelson family, it was more than just a financial win. It was a moment of justice. After years of feeling overlooked and underpaid, they had finally helped set the record straight. It wasn't just about money. It was about honoring Ricky's legacy and making sure his contributions to music were truly recognized and respected. But Sony wasn't the only label involved. Around the same time, the estate also reached a separate settlement with Capitol Records, the label that had distributed Ricky's music for years. The Nelson family accused Capitol of similar underpayments, especially concerning digital platforms like iTunes and streaming services. That case was quietly resolved, with the estate receiving a confidential payout and assurances of future royalty transparency. Beyond the money, these lawsuits changed something more profound. For decades, Ricky Nelson had been seen as a nostalgic figure, an early teen idol whose fame peaked in the 1950s. But now, thanks to his family's efforts, the world began to see the depth of his contribution. He wasn't just a charming singer with a few hits.
Just another benefit? Well, certainly we're in a new era of rock benefits, but rather than being for a cause, this one is more personal. It's for some specific people.
He was a serious musician, a pioneering performer, and an artist who had been wronged by the very system he helped build. The legal victories also gave Ricky Nelson's children a chance to finally breathe again. For years, they had carried the weight of their father's legacy, dealing with financial stress and feeling like his hard work had been forgotten. There was very little to show for everything he had achieved. But now, with royalties restored and the estate properly organized, they finally had a foundation to build on. So how exactly are Ricky's kids moving forward with what their father left behind? Let's take a closer look. The future of Ricky Nelson. After the courtroom battle ended, the Nelson family wasn't just dealing with a financial win. They were now responsible for something much bigger. The rebirth of their father's name and legacy. It was something that needed to be cared for with heart and intention. Today, each of Ricky Nelson's children has followed a different path, shaped by fame, personal loss, and the lasting shadow of a father the world once adored. But with the estate finally restored and the truth brought to light, their journeys now carry a new purpose and a deeper meaning. For Tracy Nelson, the oldest of Ricky's 4 children, life was never easy. Born in 1963, she stepped into the spotlight early, appearing in her first movie as a child. Acting was in her blood. After all, her grandparents were Ozzie and Harriet, and her father was one of America's first TV stars. But fame didn't protect her from life's hardships. Just months after getting married in the late 1980s, Tracy Nelson was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. The news was a shock, coming just as her adult life was starting. But she faced it with strength. More health battles followed. Thyroid cancer, then breast cancer. Each time, Tracy fought through and came out stronger. She began speaking out, working with cancer groups using the money from her father's estate, writing, and raising awareness. Her efforts earned her awards and deep respect. Now, she has become more than just Ricky Nelson's daughter. She is a survivor, a mother, and a voice for others. In her memoir, The Nelsons, she shared her family's story with honesty, love, and grace. While Tracy was fighting her personal battles and building a name for herself in acting and health advocacy, her younger twin brothers, Gunnar and Matthew, born in 1967, were facing a different kind of struggle, proving themselves in the music world without being overshadowed by their father's legacy. The world was first introduced to them in 1990, when their band, Nelson, made a huge impact with the hit song which they titled "Can't Live Without Your Love and Affection." The song reached #1 on some musical charts, and their debut album, After the Rain, went double platinum. With their long blonde hair, strong vocal harmonies, and emotional songs, they had everything a successful pop-rock band needed in the early 1990s. For a time, it seemed like they were on the path to becoming major stars. But the music world changes fast. As grunge music rose and glam pop faded, Gunnar and Matthew suddenly felt out of place. Instead of chasing trends or trying to fit in, they made a brave decision. They left their major record label and started their own label called Stone Canyon Records. They named it after the band their father once formed to escape industry control. It wasn't the easy route, but it followed the values they had grown up with. Staying true to themselves, making music their own way, and protecting their creative freedom. Eventually, they found something even more meaningful than chart success: a sense of purpose. In 2010, Gunnar and Matthew used their inheritance to create a live show called Ricky Nelson Remembered. It was more than just a concert. It was a tribute that mixed music, personal stories, and rare family footage. Their goal wasn't just to sing their father's songs. It was to share who he really was with a new generation. The audience loved it. The show became a popular tour, not just for its music, but for the heart and history behind it. They've both said the same thing in different ways. This show is their love letter to their father, to the man who changed music and television. And in their own way, they're keeping his legacy alive by using music and storytelling to bring his voice back into people's lives. But not all of Ricky Nelson's children chose a life in the spotlight. Sam Nelson, the youngest of the four, was born in 1974 and took a quieter path. After his parents' divorce, Sam's early years were filled with emotional ups and downs. In 1987, Sam Nelson became the center of a highly publicized custody battle between his mother, Kristen, and his uncle, actor Mark Harmon. The case made national headlines, bringing private family struggles into the public eye. As he grew older, Sam chose to step away from fame. He studied psychology and film, building a life focused on personal growth and creativity. While he never sought attention, he stayed involved behind the scenes, working in creative fields, managing parts of the Nelson estate, and helping protect his father's legacy. Just because he's quiet doesn't mean he's distant. In fact, those close to the family say Sam has played a key role in keeping Ricky's name respected and his music handled with care. But here comes the shocker. Ricky Nelson actually had a fifth child. His name is Eric Jude Crew. He was born in 1981 after a brief relationship between Ricky and a woman named Georgian Crew. For years, Eric's existence was kept quiet. At first, Ricky denied being the father, but legal tests later proved the truth, and he was ordered to pay child support. Still, Eric was never publicly welcomed by the Nelson family. Most notably, he was left out of Ricky's will. The wound between Eric and the rest of the family never truly healed. To this day, his relationship with his half-siblings is distant, if it exists at all. But in all of this, what's clear is that the Nelson children didn't just inherit fame. They also inherited the pain, the division, and the broken pieces left behind by a life lived in the spotlight. The loss of their father, the legal battles, the public struggles, and the private heartbreak. They carried all of it. Yet through everything, the family has endured. They took a past full of challenges and turned it into something more meaningful. Instead of letting the pain define them, they chose to protect Ricky's legacy, learn from it, and share it in their own way. From courtroom victories against major record labels to tribute shows that bring audiences to their feet, the Nelsons have worked hard to keep their father's memory alive, not just through music, but through action. So yes, It's safe to say that Ricky Nelson left behind a fortune so big it made his family cry, not just because of the money, but because of what it stood for. After years of loss, silence, and struggle, they finally found justice. But that fortune didn't come easily. They had to fight for every part of it. What do you think about what Ricky Nelson left behind? Do you believe his children will continue to build on that legacy and carry it forward? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.